Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Today is the 23rd day. I think it's the 23rd, 24th day of June 2023. It is bright and early, as you can see, about 9:15 in the morning. I've been dealing with my neighbor's lawn, and come to find out, after watering and things aren't looking any better, come to find out, I think it's... Hang on a second. I don't know why this is important. It really isn't. You going to focus on the grass or not, you piece of shit? All right, fuck it then. Go back to manual. Okay. Screw it. That doesn't work. There we go. Good enough. Anyway. I think there's a fungus with her St. Augustine grass. So can water it until the cows come home, literally, and it's not going to change a damn thing. So I got to deal with that now. I don't know why I have to deal with it, but there you go. And then I got to go over here and fix his fucking roof that the other goddamn neighbor fucked up, and get paid nothing for any of it. Isn't that fucking awesome? What a fucking dumbass I am. Anyway, good morning. The Wagner group. Now, I know people don't want to say it that way, but that's what it is. Apparently, the owner, Putin's chef, which is bullshit. It's a bullshit fucking story. I've talked about the owner has this thing for Richard Wagner. He's Flight of the Valkyries guy. Also just happens to be, according to Wikipedia, Hitler's favorite fucking composer. As if that fucking mattered. But so the Wagner group is supposedly announced that they are going to launch a military coup against the state of Russia. When faced with this news, President Vladimir Putin took a nap. That's how concerned he was. He's not concerned. Because the story is absolutely fucking bogus. I'm sure he did make the statement. He is a quote-unquote oligarch. If he's an oligarch, he's oligarch junior. He's at the little table of oligarchs, where the big people eat up here for Thanksgiving, and of course he's at the little table with the little oligarchs. Here's the deal: supposedly there was some kind of missile strike on the Wagner group, fucking mercenaries, mercs. And because it came from behind them, they said it must be Putin. And therefore, he came out immediately with a statement about we're waging war now on Putin, and I'm calling on everybody to rise up against Vladimir Putin in Russia. That's stupid. First of all, nobody can get into fucking behind them and fucking launch something between them and the fucking forces. Any military person would figure that out immediately and say, okay, we got to figure this out. Turns out that they know it's a hoax too. They know the whole fucking, it was all staged. They know that the video that's out there of the little pot fires next to a fucking thing in the forest where they said the two bodies they showed. They're claiming 2,000 fucking soldiers were killed. 2,000 of the mercs were killed. So far, in looking at all the videos, I've seen the full body of one body blurred out. So it could be a Ukrainian soldier they happen to have on standby and threw on the ground. And I've seen a couple body parts, and that's it. The story is ridiculous. They discovered the metadata from the video and their announcement were about 15 minutes apart, which means they videotaped the still smoldering and the fires burning. And of course, the general immediately jumps to the conclusion that it was Russia that did it within 15 minutes. That nobody would do that. No military leadership would do that. That's fucking stupid. So clearly it's been staged. And I'll show you the video that they're showing that's running around. I'll show you where they claim 2,000 soldiers died or mercenaries died. That's not the story. The story is the failed counteroffensive, and how back about a month ago, the Biden administration was very concerned about their failed the counteroffensive failed miserably, which it was going to. How would that pan out in terms of being able to keep drawing this conflict out? The IMF has just recently stated that a number of European countries, westernized European countries, are now in the process of defaulting on the glorious IMF loans, which means they're demanding austerity. They're demanding reducing the amount of increasing prime interest rates, but also and increasing the amount of austerity measures on the people. This is the same shit that we do to other countries. We destabilize them, then we go in and we fucking make the economy scream, and then we can replace whatever their system is with our system, a neoliberal system. That's our pattern. The IMF is always behind that. They always make the loans to start with and go, you haven't got enough money to pay your loans. You haven't got enough money to pay the usury fee, which is one of the reasons that Western banking hates Islamic banking. They don't do that. Usury is supposed to be a crime in the West. It's not really. In fact, they laugh about it at the country clubs. It's a joke. Usury is what we base our foreign policy on. And now what's happening is they're turning that shit inward toward us because they have nothing else to fucking steal and loot from that can't defend themselves. You know, they tried with Afghanistan, they failed that. They tried with fucking Libya, they're in the process of failing that. They tried with Syria, they failed with that. Somalia, Sudan, a couple of African nations, but listen, we got a lot of greedy vulture capitalists who are determined they're not going to go out of business, and their business is based on usury. Their business is based on fucking vulture capitalism of mergers and acquisitions on a national scale. The Wolf of Wall Street, what's that? Greed is good. What's that fucking movie with Michael Douglas? That kind of fucking behavior, but instead on a corporate level or business level, it's on a national level. They're doing those things to other states. Well, the problem is there's no other states. So now they got to turn inward. They got to start eating themselves, and that's what they're doing. And they're hoping they can get to the point where if the usury gets worse, if the austerity measures get bad enough, then they'll be able to, and the people start screaming enough for something different, then they'll be able to bring about the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And that's what the plan with Russia has been the entire time. I told you from the beginning of this thing. It was never about bringing Russia to its knees. They all said that when they finally started, quote unquote, telling the truth, but it wasn't. It was about bringing Italy, Greece, Germany, Spain, United Kingdom, and Portugal, the United States, and Canada, and Australia, and New Zealand, and all the other fucking westernized countries to their fucking knees, to our fucking knees. That's what it was always about. It was always about that. I'm sure at some point in time somebody will mention that, and that will become a thing. Until then, but that's what it's always been about. what's happening with the Wagner group is very simple. This latest counteroffensive was doomed from the start. But it was a good way to pump some more money into them. And by them, I mean their oligarchs and our oligarchs. And the money goes into fucking the fund, and then the money goes over to Ukraine, and then the money goes back to the United States, or back to fucking Aruba, or back to fucking, wherever the fucking the best tax haven is. The money is stolen. Or it goes into Ukraine to come back to, parts of it go into Ukraine and comes back to the United States via military-industrial complex, buying more fucking shit. Typically what that means is we sell them our old shit, and then we buy the new shit from Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, United, what is it, General Dynamics, like tons of them. You know who they are. That's how that works. So that was good. The counteroffensive was good for that for a little while. But the counteroffensive is failing, and it's failing miserably. They have issues with that. A month and a half ago, they came out and talked about that. I'll show you that link. A month and a half ago, they came out and talked about that. And they said, we got problems. If this thing doesn't go through, we're not going to be able to get any more fucking glorious money to send to fucking Ukraine, because people will say, it's pointless. It's fucking pointless. Another recent development was when the African nations came to Vladimir Putin, when talking to Vladimir Putin and addressing him, and saying, let's talk about this. We got to figure out some way to put this to rest. He had to clarify something with them, which is something that I pointed out a long time ago. When they were surrounding Kiev in the early stages, I told you it would take 2 weeks. It was about a month and a half in, 2 months. But they were surrounding Kiev. And they had taken the whole fucking eastern side of the country. They had taken, of course, the southern part of the country. And they were driving a wedge right into the middle of it. And they were surrounding Kiev. When they were doing that, as Putin points out in the videos, I can't find the fucking news on this or the video again. The only place I found talking about is 21st Century Wire and Patrick Henningsen, and he won't post a link to it. And of course, in his fucking video, in his thing. So fuck him. I'm not going to post a link to his shit. But this really did happen. Putin came out and said, this was earlier this week. Putin came out and said, we had a fucking ceasefire agreement, and I remember covering that. And he said, that's why we pulled out. That's why we removed all of our forces, and we're removing our forces back just to the Donbass region. I talked about this last year, middle of the summer last year, or towards it. It's probably middle of the summer last year. He said we had an agreement, and we were pulling out, and we were doing our part. And he said, and I quote, and Zelensky just threw the agreement away. Of course he threw the agreement away, because his owners told him to. His owners said, say anything you can to fucking Vladimir Putin to keep them from taking the capital. Because the people telling him what to do, they weren't going to come in there and rescue and save fucking Ukraine. They weren't about to get into a fucking straight up conventional war with Putin. Because they couldn't beat fucking the Taliban. They couldn't beat the Taliban. And you think they're going to go after fucking, they're going to go toe to toe with Russia? So he comes out and says to the Africans, the group that had come up there and discuss, a delegation that came to discuss this with him. He said, this is the situation we had. Nobody covered it. He said, and as a gentleman's rule, we weren't going to come out and share the contractual agreements. He said, but I'm going to now. And so he shared with the African delegation the agreement. And it clearly shows that Russia was doing exactly what they said they were going to do. It also clearly shows by their actions that it was Ukraine that violated it. And of course it was Ukraine that violated it. Why? Hillary Clinton admitted that we used, and of course Zygmunt Brzezinski was there, which fucking gave Mika her job. But when we went into Afghanistan with our proxy army, the Mujahideen, later to be called Al-Qaeda, the point was, let's just draw it out with Russia. Let them waste their money and waste their money and waste their money. It was a war of I can't think of the word I'm looking for. But it drew them out. They got stuck in a fucking quagmire. It was a war of attrition. And that's what Afghanistan was. This is different. We're not doing that to Russia. Do you know who they're doing that to now? I gave you a list earlier. Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, the United Kingdom, China, not China, Japan, of course, Australia, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, the westernized countries. The war of attrition in fucking Ukraine is not designed to weaken Russia. It's designed to weaken us. They are literally waging an economic warfare against the West. And who's doing it? The West. Western oligarchs. Business interests. BlackRock, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase. Big business interests are doing this. They're doing it in order to remake our system from the ground up into one that they can control, they will run, they will own, and there will be nothing anybody can ever do to stop it. They will be spying on you all the time. You will not be able to communicate like this with people. This will be shut down. This will be shuttered. This will be terrorism. Any dissenting thought will be criminalized. And the punishment will either be jail time, probably work camps, concentration camps, where you will work for a company for free as a slave. Work will make you free. Or they'll just turn you off. And off you go into the sunset, under a bridge, to live like a troll. That's the world they want. This is how they're going to get it. Now, back to the Wagner Group. So you have two things recently that's happened that's made them very concerned. One is, of course, the failure of the counter assault, whatever they call it. That's failed. And the other, of course, is Putin coming out and saying to the rest of the world, this is clearly what's happening. So why all of a sudden flip Wagner? Wagner was always going to be flipped. There's no question. I mean, they've been calling him Putin's fucking chef and Putin's friend and Putin's ally. Putin's never met this motherfucker. And if he ever ate at one of his restaurants, he ate there once. And that's it. He's not Putin's chef. He's not Putin's buddy. He's a fucking minor oligarch who had some money, who set up his own version of Blackwater in fucking Russia. They're not a fucking Russian state fucking sponsored proxy army. That's what they are. And as an oligarch, he decided in 2014 to put together a fighting force to defend Crimea and to help the people in Donetsk and Lugansk, in the Donbass region, who were seeking fucking independence. So, of course, Putin would have no problem with that. being that no nation should have a problem with that. However, the Wagner group has also helped the CIA's fucking assets down in Haftar, down in fucking Libya. So Putin doesn't have say. He doesn't have veto authority over what a private fucking business, a private fucking citizen in Russia does. Just like we can't blame either Obama or Bush or Biden or even Trump, even though Trump was closer to Eric Prince than any of the other ones. But we can't blame those presidents for what fucking Eric Prince did with Blackwater and whatever the fuck they call themselves now. Unless, of course, they directly pay them. Then that's different. Now, there's questions as to whether or not... I'm sure they probably have some contracts with the fucking Russian military. Again, a lot of businesses have contracts with the Russian military. This one just happens to be one filled with fucking mercenaries. Here's the problem with hiring mercenaries. And the problem is right in the fucking word itself, mercenary. They will go ultimately where the biggest fucking paycheck is. Which apparently is what this jackass has done. I'm going to show you some stuff. I'm not going to play, I will play maybe one video. I'm sure it's probably already screwing up I got too many fucking links. So I'm pretty much guaranteed that this is a very glitchy fucking thing. I apologize for that. Russian military chief vows retaliation, claiming 2,000 fighters were killed. There's the number 2,000. This is from MSNBC. That's the fucking dude. Prigozhin, my fault. Yevgeny Prigozhin. He is supposedly what they call Putin's chef, which he's not. That, by the way, is not from the announcement. People look at that and they think that's the picture from the announcement. That's from May. The announcement was made via radio. Now, you can ask yourself, why was the announcement made on radio? Could be that somebody had a fucking gun to the dude's head. I want to play a little bit of this. This is from CNN. I'm sure it'll be glitchy, and I apologize. From the beginning.
These are the chaotic scenes posted by the Wagner mercenary group.
Okay, let's start off with this. These are the chaotic scenes. Those are two fucking... That right there. See that orange fucking fire? Do you see the orange color in that fucking fire? That's not wood burning. Wood doesn't do that. Do you know what turns a nice orange like that? Kind of like the nice orange you see in like TV show fires and movie fires. It's called contact cement. And I used it a lot when I was building and doing laminates and stuff like that and veneers and shit like that. Contact cement. I like to burn contact cement because it has a... It's like gasoline when it's not the actual gasoline that burns, but the fumes that it releases. Contact cement is the same way. So when you see somebody running, I'm on fire, and they get the suit on, and they got these big orange, exciting looking flames coming off of them, what they've done is they put the suit on him, and they put the mask on him, and they've painted him with contact cement. And they said, are you ready? And the director of photography says, I'm ready. And they say to the guy, you ready? And he says, ooh. And they light him up. Action. And he runs, and he's got orange flames. That's contact cement. This dramatic scene is staged. 100%. And you also know that because it's like when they were, and I covered this as well, real time. When the people were just walking through the fucking Hall of Statues with their cell phones going, wow. And CNN was going, oh my God, it's awful. It's a fucking insurgency. What the fuck? when the reporting doesn't match what you're seeing, you know it's staged. Go back again, go back to the warning here, and then I want you to just look and tell me if these two pieces of fucking wood on fire rise to the occasion of what he says.
These are the chaotic scenes posted by the Wagner mercenary group of what they say is their forest camp struck by the Russian military.
It's
In the clearing, trees appear to have been smashed, some with fabric strewn from their branches. Through a gash in the soil, a fire burns in what appears to be a destroyed bunker. There are gruesome images too, of a corpse in the undergrowth, as well as severed body parts. The Russian Defense Ministry denies any role in this, but a furious Wagner leader is vowing revenge.
Here he goes.
Those who destroyed our guys today, along with tens of thousands of lives of Russian soldiers, will be punished. I ask no one to put up any resistance. Justice for the troops will be restored, and then justice for all of Russia.
Justice for the troops and all of Russia. Seems kind of ambiguous. He could be talking about Ukrainians, but then again, who knows? Everyone seems to think he's talking about Putin. And then justice for all of Russia. Could be he's talking about fucking Ukraine. Who knows? But they're saying he's talking about Russia. And Russia is responding as if he's talking about Russia. So those were the... That's the video, and that's the fucking... part of the radio announcement. Key points of Putin's address to nation over the PMC Wagner Group's attempted coup attempt. Criminal investigation has been opened into Evgeny Prigozhin for calling for an armed rebellion. Don't know if that's really what he was doing. Russian President Vladimir Putin has delivered an address to the nation amid a coup attempt by the private military company Wagner. He describes the mutineers' actions as backstabbing and calls for unity. Late on Friday, PMC Wagner's boss, Evgeny Prigozhin, accused the Russian military of striking his group's base, something the Defense Ministry has strongly denied. Russian authorities, in turn, have launched a criminal investigation into Prigozhin over staging an armed insurrection. Now, I'm not going to read all of these. But I'll read the first few sentences here. President Putin argued that Russia today is waging a grueling fight for its future, facing off with neo-Nazis and their masters. All true. He went on to stress that essentially the entire might of the West's military, economic, and information machine is being directed against the country. Not quite true, but there you go. This battle, the fate of our people is decided, calls for national unity and consolidation, Putin said in his address. According to the president, all internal conflicts and bickering must be put aside at present, as our external enemies can use them to undermine us internally. The Russian head of state emphasized that any actions driving a wedge between Russians are nothing short of backstabbing of our country and our people. There's these are his statements. I'll post a link to them here. You can go look at them for yourself. There's an interesting article here also. This is on Sputnik. And there's some really good reasons why they believe that this whole thing was staged. The armed forces of Russian Federation continue to carry out combat missions on the line of contact with the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of special military operation. A video posted by Prigozhin purported to show the aftermath of a rocket strike on the Wagner rear camps by the forces of Russian Defense Ministry. It was staged, Russia's Channel 1 said, with its anchor, I Can't Even Try, pointed out on live on the air 3 points that prove the video of the aftermath of the alleged strike in the Wagner camp is staged. The first indication, she said, is the lack of any other video evidence. This is true. A lot of times they'll send one person in, once they do a staging for a fucking scene, they've got one camera and one camera only. Because that's the one view that they're going to have of it. It's like a fucking director in a film. You know, you have one camera going off and that's it. You don't have multiple random ones running around at the same fucking time. The second is the statements, that statements on behalf of Prigozhin were distributed in the format of audio messages whose metadata is the same. They were all recorded at the same time and published in delayed mode. The third indication was that no more than 15 minutes had elapsed between the publication of the video of the alleged strikes and the first video of the statements. And it's doubtful that it is possible to collect all the reports from the field, analyze the consequences, and record the messages in such a short period of time. They're clearly staged. The stupid fucking fire scene is clearly fucking staged, and there's no doubt about that. This is not a fucking rocket strike. This is, they cleared some underbrush, and they dug a trench. That's what this is. That's all this is. And they set some fires with contact cement. They don't buy it. I don't buy it. It's totally bullshit. Now, here's the question. How bullshit is it? They said 2,000 of their soldiers were killed, of their mercenaries were killed. Clearly, that's not the case. How many do they still have? And how many of them will be behind this? I mean, how many of them are going to get behind this? Paycheck is one thing. There are a lot of mercenaries in the United States. And they do all kinds of fucking jobs, and they go out on all kinds of fucking contracts. Some are protecting oligarchs in other countries. Some are protecting oligarchs here. Some are actually doing what they call wet work, I guess. Some are doing other things. Who the fuck knows? I'm not a merc myself. But I dare say there are very few who for a paycheck would decide to fucking line up on the other side against SEAL Team 6 or Special Forces or the Marines or, you know, our fucking Obama's glorious killer drones or the American people. So, with that in mind, I don't think that this is, it's hard for me to believe that they could put together enough Russians. Now, mind you, there are Russians who are on the side of the glorious oligarchs who want to regime change Russia because they've been told that they will benefit, just like other countries who do this, they will benefit and they will make more money in a fully neoliberalized free market country. Yay! Go business! And so they're on board with that. However, they are usually cowardly little backstabbing, sniveling weasels. Or fundamentalist freaks. People who would do that to their own country are far and few between. There's enough of them, usually, for us to use them and collect them together in other countries and turn them into some kind of proxy fucking army. But Russia? That's not going to happen. And there's not going to be nearly enough of them. They do have a couple little groups here and there that call themselves like, you know, separatists or whatever the fuck they want to call. I mean, we're not talking Chechens, we're talking about Russia. But, again, a small number. Would there be enough of those types of folks in the Wagner group? I'm reminded of, before it goes away, you should check out this. And I don't know if it's gone away yet. Let's take a quick look. because it might. Because they're going to be our fucking new heroes. They're going to be our new fucking ISIS, our new fucking Al-Qaeda, our new Al-Nusra. This is the Wagner Group page. They talk about this stuff. And I want to share with you this. It's been reported that the real fucking Nazis are the Russians. They're the real, by idiots. And what they've used as evidence is pictures of some fighters who have Nazi symbols tattooed to them. What they typically don't tell you is these are fucking Wagner mercenaries. Are there Nazis in the Wagner mercenary group? Yes. And in fact, one of the fucking leaders of his little band of mercenaries, one of his own is a avowed Nazi or Nazi sympathizer. Let me show you something. Yeah, here's the Freedom of Russian Legion. Here's the Russian Volunteer Corps. These are people. These are opponents to the Wagner Group at one point in time. Don't know where the alliances are going to be now with them. They say the allies are. They haven't updated this yet. The Russian armed forces, which they clearly are not now. And I seriously doubt the separatists in Donbass are going to be their allies either after this bullshit. It's fascinating to see how quickly something like this can materialize. Again, it's just a staged fucking scene. It's a staged scene out in the fucking woods and a recording from some guy who may or may not have a fucking gun to his head. And it has caused a good deal of concern and caused a good deal of ink to be spilled talking about this situation. But is it actually an armed mutiny in Russia? 100% absolutely not. At this point, Ukraine, because of their failed counteroffensive, is having to fucking run around and kidnap people off the streets to throw them into the fucking meat grinder on behalf of the American westernized oligarchs to keep their fucking destabilization campaign against their own countries going. Biden was very concerned about what was going to happen. This was 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Biden was very concerned, and his people were very concerned about what was going to happen when this counteroffensive failed. And they knew it would fail. Of course they knew it was going to fail. Excuse me. The Biden administration is quietly preparing for the possibility that Ukraine's spring counteroffensive falls short of expectations. Critics at home and allies abroad will argue the America has come up short again. Ukraine's ever-imminent counteroffensive will attempt to retake Russian-seized territory, most likely in the east and south, though for operational reasons, no senior officials from Kiev have detailed specifics. Publicly, President Joe Biden's team has offered unwavering support for Ukraine, pledging to load it up with weapons and economic aid for as long as it takes. But if the impending fighting season yields limited gains, administration officials have expressed privately that they fear being faced with a two-headed monster attacking it from the hawkish and the dovish ends of the spectrum. One side will say Ukraine's advances would have worked had the administration given Kiev everything it asked for, namely longer-range missiles, fighter jets, and more air defenses. The other side, administration officials worry, will claim that Ukraine's shortcomings prove it can't force Russia out of its territory completely. That doesn't even account for the reaction of America's allies, mainly in Europe, who may see a peace negotiation between Ukraine and Russia as a more attractive option if Kiev can't prove victory is around the corner. Well, they're here now. This is where they're at now. This is the point they've come to. And simultaneously, right as this counteroffensive is done and dead in the fucking water, even though there's some out there who still try to say it's not. They haven't lost. But everyone knows it has. And as Africa has come to fucking Russia to say, let's work out a deal, as Zelensky himself has communicated with China and said, the Chinese deal doesn't sound all that together that bad. The oligarchs in the United States have not gotten to the point yet where they can come right out and say, we've got to remake our entire fucking system because it's collapsed. 8 hours ago, many Western states in critical situation due to high public debt, says the IMF official. Oh my goodness. It's all about COVID. It's all about what's happened with Russia. And where's the list I tried to memorize and gave you last week, just a little while ago? Almost all European countries are now facing significant levels of debt, including Great Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, not to mention Greece, Italy. And you can add Canada, New Zealand, Australia, the United States. There's going to have to be budget consolidation. What does that mean? Austerity measures. That means make the economies scream. They have not gotten to the point yet. They've got to keep this thing going a little bit longer. So they flip the fucking asset, a mercenary, an owner of a mercenary group, to try to keep it going a little while longer. Let's see if we can toss it's a trump card. They're playing a trump card. It's a last ditch effort. It's a fucking Hail Mary. And it's meaningless. I know Putin is reacting in a way which is a bit odd to me. As I was reading that earlier, I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? We can't have any internal dissent now. Stop it, because we've got all this shit going on. What the fuck is he talking about? No one cares. The Wagner mercenary group is not going to overthrow fucking Russia. It's not. Period. They couldn't overthrow a city on the border if they wanted. Russia would come in and wipe them off the map. And in fact, knowing that, most mercenaries, because again, mercenaries are there for the money, they're going to look at the cost-benefit analysis. How much is my fucking paycheck versus what's the likelihood of me being killed by Ukrainians versus the likelihood of me being killed by fucking Russians. And then you can toss onto that a little caveat. Do I really want to kill Russians? I have families. I have a family of families living in fucking Russia. So what's going to happen to the mercenary group? You'll have the neo-Nazis. They'll stay. How good are they fighting in fucking Ukraine right now? How effective are they in Ukraine right now against the Russians? Not very. And you have the vast majority of the rest who will peel off and say, fuck this shit. I don't know. It's not an issue. It shouldn't be a concern. I think Putin giving it that much fucking airtime, calling a special fucking thing for it. Maybe I've missed something. I didn't read his whole statement. Maybe I've missed something. He's calling for unity. He's calling for all this shit. Maybe I missed something, but I don't see it as a threat to the integrity of the state of Russia in any way, shape, or form. It's certainly not as big a threat as we are trying to present it as here. And that's really the point. It's not so much our oligarchs and the people running this shit and our deep state think these jackasses are going to somehow overthrow fucking Russia or Putin. No, it's just fucking news cycle. It's just a way to keep people out there thinking if they can build it up as a big enough fucking story, not only is it a distraction, again, from what's happening with the FBI and what the FBI is being exposed for, but if they can keep building it up as something and say, see, we still got something. Now we got these Russians and there's 50,000 of them and they're angry. Let's pump more money into it and more money into it. Meanwhile, the IMF is saying, you guys are slipping. You're slipping. You're not paying your usury fees. We're going to have to fucking impose these fucking austerity measures. We're going to have to make the economies scream. What we did with Ukraine and pulling Russia in by bombing Donbass was never about weakening Russia like it was in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen. What we did when Zelensky signed that agreement to get Putin to withdraw his troops and keep him from taking Kiev and then going back on that wasn't about weakening Russia. It was always about continuing the conflict so it would weaken our fucking systems. It would cause massive inflation, and it didn't have to cause massive inflation. That was done by the oligarchs because they understood the game plan. They understood the fucking campaign. The campaign's never been against Russia. It's always been against us. Always been against us. So too is this bullshit staged coup from the Wagner group. It's just about continuing the fucking make the economies scream campaign. And that's it. So it's much ado about nothing, and it really is much ado about nothing. And I thank you guys for your time. Bye-bye.